गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस चतुर्थ सदस्य श्रीमती स्वामी शेषभक्ति व्यान स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON संस्थापकाचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस चतुर्थ सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद श्रीलकौर किशोरदास बाबा जी महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुरा की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबा महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्रीदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से गो कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोकुल श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देव की जय। तुलसी देव की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथ श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। ISKCON रत्न गुरुवंद की जय। समावेद भक्तवृंद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled gods. All glories to the assembled gods. All glories to the assembled gods. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वती व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु पत्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिः। Hare Krishna. So welcome you all to this Tuesday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 20, Text 29 and 30. First we'll read Text 29. Tvam kanacharnam bojam madavihvala lochanam kanchik kalapa vilasad dukula channa rodasam tam kanacharnam bojam madavihvala lochanam kanchik kalapa vilasad dukula channa rodasam tam kanacharnam bojam madavihvala lochanam kanchik kalapa vilasad dukula channa rodasam. The body given up by Brahma took the form of the evening twilight when the day and night meet, a time which kindles passion. The asuras, who are passionate by nature, dominated as they are by the elements of rajas, took it for a damsel whose lotus feet resounded with the tinkling of anklets, whose eyes were wide with intoxication, and whose hips were covered by fine cloth over which shone a girdle. As early morning is the period for spiritual cultivation, the beginning of evening is a period for passion. Demoniac men are generally very fond of sex enjoyment, therefore they very much appreciate the approach of evening. The demons took the approach of the evening twilight to be a beautiful woman, and they began to adore her in various ways. They imagined the twilight to be a very beautiful woman with tinkling bangles on her feet, a girdle on her hips and beautiful breasts. And for their sexual satisfaction, they imagined the appearance of this beautiful girl before them. Text 30. Anyonyashlesha yotunga nirantara payodharam sunasham sadvijam snigdha hasalila valokanam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Her breasts projected upward because of their clinging to each other, and they were too contiguous to admit any intervening space. She had a shapely nose and beautiful teeth. A lovely smile played on her lips, and she cast a sportful glance at the asuras. There's no purport here. Om Jnanati Virandas Jnananjan Salakaya Chakshurmulta Meena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadati Swa Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Shakrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostade Taptakan Chanagaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Ushabhanusita Devi Pranamami Haripriye Ancha Kalpatarupyascha Kapasnadopya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Muham Karo Devachalam Pankam Langi De Guru Myat Kapat Muhammad Deshi Guru Daitarna Paramadana Madhava Shri Chaitanya Mishra. Hare Krishna. So here in these two verses we see, from the previous verses we see that Brahma gave up the body, and based on the instructions given by the Lord. And when Brahma gave up the body, the time was such that it's a twilight. Twilight means it's in between, the time between the day and the night. So that is the time he gave up the body. And this is a time, it is mentioned in the translation, that it kindles passion. And normally the asuras or demoniac people are passionate by nature. And by this nature, they imagined that this twilight to be in the form of a woman. Now, it may be difficult for us to comprehend how this can happen, but the point is that just like a person, a devotee who is practicing Krishna consciousness, he sees Krishna in everything and everywhere. He can see literally the presence of Krishna. But similarly, on the other hand, we will see that from this verse itself, that a person who has got a demoniac nature, he sees a point or an opportunity to enjoy every moment and in everything. So the demons here, they look at even this twilight, which is such a time between day and night, as a point of enjoyment, which is true. And they look at this point in the form of a woman. Now, demoniac people normally enjoy in illicit activities, that is meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. And they are all circled after one after the other. The moment one starts eating meat, then what happens is that his appetite increases and somehow he has to satisfy his hunger for lust. So then he has to indulge in sex, which normally is an illicit sex. And of course, they take intoxication also, and they indulge in gambling. Gambling can be of many forms. We'll not go into that detail today. But the point is that just as a Krishna conscious devotee looks Krishna being present everywhere, a demon thinks of a woman everywhere, whatever he sees. So here they are looking at this point of time. Oh, the time has come for me to enjoy. The example is, if we see our day-to-day life, I'm not talking of the life of a devotee, but generally a demoniac person, what he might do is, he might get up very late from bed. Until late night, they might be enjoying drinking, eating, having union with the opposite sex and so forth. So they get up very late. And then what happens is that they have to rush to their business or their office, which is generally passionate. I have to do this, I have to achieve this, I must do this, I must do that. And then what happens? They are tired with the whole days running around and working hard. They are tired. So when they are tired, they come back home or wherever, go to club, pass the evening, pass the night, somehow in illicit activities, and then come home and sleep late. This is a demoniac person. But on the other hand, we'll see a devotee who is practicing Krishna consciousness. He will get up in the morning, he will do his path, he will do his puja, he will do his chanting. Everything is transcendental, not even on the goodness mode. It means transcendental activities. So what happens is that even if he is performing some activities during the day, if he is perfectly practicing, he has got that understanding, yes, whatever I'm doing is for the sake of Krishna. I'm doing it, but I'm doing for the satisfaction of Krishna. So this is the right understanding that one must have. And then what happens is he goes to bed early and they say early to bed, early to rise. So here, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Prabhupada itself, and early morning is the period for spiritual cultivation. The beginning of evening is the period for passion. So devotees normally are situated in a goodness mode. Even if they are working, they have the proper understanding. This is one point. We will look at the passion. This purport is more on the mode of passion and ignorance. So we will discuss that today. Now, what happens is that demoniac people are normally attracted by the beauty of a woman, which is what's described in this verse and the next verse. Now, devotees, they are not carried away by seeing even beautiful women. Now, example is Haridas Thakura himself. He was chanting 300,000 names a day, every day. And a prostitute came to allure him, but she could not allure him. But what happened was, in the process, she sat. He asked her to be sitting, to be patiently, and she sat. And in the process, by the purity of his chanting, she also started chanting, and she became a great devotee of the Lord. Similarly, Maya herself came to allure Haridas Thakura, but could not allure Haridas Thakura. This was the power of his devotional service. One time, it is said that Srila Prabhupada was traveling with somebody, and someone asked him, what miracle you can perform? And Srila Prabhupada said, I can be put in a room full of naked women, but still nothing will happen to me. That means nothing could disturb Srila Prabhupada. This was the power of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. This is what is devotional service. Now, on the other hand, demoniac people like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, they want to enjoy union with the opposite sex. Now, Srila Prabhupada always quoted that a woman's form is a complete representation of Maya. Now, this form has been created by the Lord itself, now to allure the opposite sex, by which one develops an attraction, and from attraction comes attachment, and then with attachment what happens is that one becomes bound in this material world. And when one is in the mode of ignorance, then he is always in a state of dreaming. There are three states it is mentioned, that wakefulness, sleep, and deep sleep. Now, all these three modes are in the material, from the three modes of material nature. The explanation given is that wakefulness comes from the mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. But the fourth element is pure consciousness, which is above all these three, and is achieved by the development of Krishna consciousness. We will have some understanding on this. Now, wakefulness is a situation which is always in the mode of goodness. Anybody you see who is always alert throughout the day, he is in that mode of goodness. But a person who is in the mode of passion or in the mode of ignorance, he is always dreaming. The dream need not be one when somebody is asleep. One is we get dreams when we are asleep. But a demoniac person generally dreams even when he is awake, because he's of his passion. He thinks, what happens if I get 10 crores today? That's a dream he's having, or it's an ambition. We can say even a desire or an ambition, but it is like a dream which can come true. We don't know. Of course, it is said that dreams can also be true, carried over due to the impressions from the previous birth. I don't want to dwell on that subject, but dream as well as the deep dreamless sleep, they dreams from the mode of passion, and a deep dreamless sleep, that means when somebody drinks, enjoys intoxicated activities, illicit sex activities, and sleeps, he sleeps for a very long time, 10 hours, 12 hours, and you can't wake up such a person. Such a person is in a deep dreamless sleep, and it is from the mode of ignorance. But on the other hand, we find that a Krishna conscious person, he goes early to bed, and he also rises up early. So in the process, he might get even dreams seeing Krishna, or he might get dreams seeing devotees of the Lord, and so forth. Now, one example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Kamsa, he used to be dreaming a lot, but at the same time, what happened was he used to see a lot of inauspicious signs in the process of his dream, both awake as well as dreaming state. When he looked in the mirror, it is said that he could not even see his head, although his head was actually there, but he could not see his head. He could see everything in double. Many times somebody is having a vision problem. They can see things in double or triple or something like that. So Kamsa could see everything in double, although there was only one. Then he could see holes in a shadow, and he could even hear a buzzing sound with his ears. Now, all trees before him appeared to be made of gold. Now, he thought that everything is made of gold, because that's how demoniac people think. They see opportunity to gratify their senses in everything that they see and they think. So he used to see trees made of gold, and he could not see his own footprints in dust or muddy clay. But he also saw in dream various kinds of ghosts being carried in a cart drawn by donkeys. Now, these are all inauspicious things that one sees in a dream, particularly if it's demoniac in nature. But Krishna conscious person may not see all these things in a dream. So that is why one should be very, very careful in terms of attraction towards the opposite sex. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in fact, he advised in Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka. This is a quote that is from him, from the Supreme Lord himself. Alas, for a person seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord without material motives, seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification and seeing a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison willingly. We'll try to understand a little bit from this advice given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says, for a person seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord without material motive. That means if somebody wants to become free from this material world, he has to engage only in transcendental loving service of the Lord, and that too without material motives. So we perform devotional service even with a motive today, but if our desire is there within us to become free of those desires also, Lord will facilitate. Now the thing is, desire is something, as I mentioned in my previous classes, it does not come to an end. For example, we may have one desire. By the time we try to fulfill that desire, another two desires would have come into our mind. So material world means always desiring, fulfilling that. To fulfill that desire, perform activity, and sinful or not sinful, become bound in this material world. So one should reach a stage of rendering this loving service without any material desires. And it should be not only unmotivated, it should be uninterrupted. So, but till we reach that stage, we will be having some desires. But if we have a pure heart, yes, I want to serve the Lord without any desire, the Lord will facilitate that also. So when we reach that stage of devotional service, that is the time, here in the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification and seeing a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison willingly. Now, what happens when one drinks poison? One he dies. So, for a person who has reached that stage of devotion service without any motivation or desires, even seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification or seeing a woman who is interested in similar activities is worse than drinking poison. So one must be very careful in the stage of performing devotional service. The example I gave was Srila Haridas Thakura and Srila Prabhupada also. So while performing devotional service, he will definitely become detached from these activities. There are two things that happen when one performs devotional service. One is that one gets knowledge, and the other one is one starts developing detachment from this material world. One realizes that yes, whatever I'm seeing or whatever I'm doing is of an illusory nature. And so he starts developing a detachment. That is what one should get. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that he does not want to see the form of a woman even as a doll. So from this, we must understand how Maya is very, very powerful. But unfortunately, today, the whole world is situated in such a way that even if you want to buy something which is not related to a woman, the posters or they call mannequins. If you see, go to a showroom, you will have so many mannequins in the form of a woman. If you want to buy something for men also, they would have put a poster for a woman. Why? Because that is how the mode of the world is in ignorance, and the attraction is automatically developed to purchase that when they put a poster or a photo of a woman. Vice versa also, it works both ways, not that one-sided. So that is how the whole material world is created in the mode of passion. And Srila Prabhupada always used to say that the basic principle of material creation is attraction for the opposite sex. That means the whole creation has been made in such a way that one develops an attraction for the opposite sex both ways. And from there, it starts to attachment. And from attachment, what comes is that we reach a stage of I as well as mind. First, it is I in the initial stages, and it over a period of time, it extends to the stage of mind. So I and mind, I and mind. So this mode of passion is something that keeps the living entity bound in this material world. And if one does not realize or come to a stage of self-realization, then if he comes to a stage of self-realization, he can come to the mode of goodness and transcend that also. But if one does not come to that, then what happens that one reaches a point of ignorance, and then he glides down to the degraded species of life, the lower species of life. Now, some examples are given that, animals also, it is said they have some discipline. Unfortunately, human beings have no regulation, at least as far as sex life is concerned. They say that ants, when they go in a straight line. They may take turns, but they all go in a single line. Similarly, it is said that tigers, they don't eat food which is stale. They will eat only if they get something that is fresh. So that is why there was a lot of controversy on why animals are slaughtered. So we'll not go into that. Similarly, it is said that Chataka birds, these birds, they look forward for a time when they can drink water straight from the cloud. They don't drink water from the ground. So these are birds, Srila Prabhupada always used to quote, that they used to fly and look for even a drop of water coming straight from the monsoon rain. So if you look at other animals, even dogs or cats, they all have seasons during which they mate. It's not that they mate every day or every night like human beings. But human beings, they have unlimited enjoyment from these activities, and the resultant action is very, very horrible. When we say what is the resultant reaction, uh, if you compare the children of yesteryears, when I say yesteryears, people who used to look at marriage as an activity, as a samskara, children born out of Garbhodana samskara, all those children, they had some sattvic nature, or at least good, they were situated in the mode of goodness. But today, if you see every second child, maybe a Hiranyakashipu nature or Hiranyaksha right from the childhood. So the point is that this is all because of the way society is driven today. In fact, there was some time back during my earlier days in the college, there was a movement which was situated somewhere in Pune. I forgot the name of the movement also. So many big, big politicians, film stars, they all joined this movement. And this movement was outside, they were used to call it as a religious movement, but the activities that were performed in the name of the religion were abominable, and they were indulging only in this illicit sex. So what happened? The movement collapsed and everything got exposed. And if you keep a track, there is no exemption to this even today. So-called many spiritual gurus, they indulge in so many activities which are abominable in nature, kidnapping women and having unfortunate relationship with the opposite sex. So many things are happening in today in the name of religion, and they take to drinks. So these are things that are happening because in the name of religion, and such activities cannot go for a very long time, and that is why they fail, and some of them are put behind bars. That's why Srila Prabhupada always quoted that this sex life is like an itch. The more you itch, the more you scratch, the more you start feeling that itchiness. So later on, we have a swollen area. So that is why it is, Srila Prabhupada always said that sex life is something like adding fuel into the fire. He said, if you have no sex desire, then you are liberated. So this is how, if one practices Krishna consciousness and is firmly fixed, then what happens is that he becomes free from this desire. When he becomes free from this desire, he does not have attachment for any activity of this nature. So he is a liberated person. One more example that Srila Prabhupada gives is that in a vast desert, when a person is completely hungry or thirsty, he is looking for even a drop of water. So when a person is situated in the mode of passion, Maya gives that drop of water in the form of this sex life, which cannot. So that means sex life is something that the moment one gets involved into it, any amount of activity that he performs, that desire is not satisfied. So that is why one has to be very, very be careful, have the right understanding from this scriptures itself. Scriptures does not stop anyone from performing this activity. It is meant for procreation. Procreation means getting giving birth to children who can be devotees of the Lord and who can be freed from the cycle of birth and death. So that is why a very common phrase that is used is the material world is created for procreation, not for recreation. So those who are situated in the mode of goodness, they understand that it's a procreation activity. But those who are demoniac or those who are in the passion or ignorant, they look at this activity as a source of recreation. I hope you all understand. So one time someone asked Prabhupada, what if you want to draw a picture? Srila Prabhupada said, if you want to draw a picture of Maya, how would you do it? Then, Srila Prabhupada himself asked this question to many of his disciples. What would you do if you had to draw a picture of Maya? Then the disciples were wondering, and then Prabhupada replied that you draw a picture of a woman and a picture of a dollar. That is Maya. That means there are two forms of Maya. One is money and the other one is honey. And these are two things that people are running after, life after life, life after fight. And the whole fight happens, or the civilization is driven towards these two activities only, money and honey. Of course, money is required for survival of in this material world, but one should understand up to what point. So that's why I said the world is so driven that even if somebody has got crores of rupees, he still has got the desire to earn more. Not only that desire to earn more is there, but at the same time, how to utilize that money, he doesn't know. He wants to utilize for sense gratification. And apart from that, those who have this money have always afraid of how to keep that money, because they are afraid somebody might steal or somebody might forcibly take away, somebody might cheat. So many things happen. So money and honey, these are two things that keep a person bound in this material world. In fact, if somebody is very, very sensitive and sensible, they can learn a lot of lessons, at least from the two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, how all these attachment and greed takes one to a demoniac civilization and the ultimate fall down. Now, the attachment, it is said to a woman, it is not only to a woman, it works both ways. Attachment to a woman is the most complete form of resultant bondage and infatuation. So when one develops an attachment to the opposite sex, then what happens is that he remains in bondage and infatuation. The whole world is running on that attraction only. And the entire material existence and forms of the bodies are also created to fulfill this desire. Now, why? Because we wanted to enjoy separately from the Lord. But one takes to serving Radha and Krishna, one becomes free from this desire. If you look at some of the, if you look at a few years before, the women are created in such a way to observe chastity. Even in India, the system was that women used to wear saris and cover their head. There was a purpose behind that. A woman was not meant to be exposed to the outside society. But unfortunately, today, even women want to do the same activity as what men do. But earlier days, men were going outside, working or doing business or whatever it is, to bring wealth for the purpose of sustenance. That sustenance has a meaning that for one to live. But that does not mean that desire is to be unlimited. And women were to be as housewives, whereby they maintain their chastity to their only husband. Now, if you look at today's situation, women want to do the activity what men do, and they relate with many women in the working place or the outside world, with the result that women become attracted to many men. And that is one of the reasons that marriages have also failed in I won't say in a big way, but definitely the marriages are failing, and which is increasing on a day-to-day basis, which we see today. So Vedic culture was not like that. Vedic culture, Krishna made a perfect creation, but it is the human beings, particularly in the human species of life, where people have uh, exploited it. That is the best word I can use, exploited, with the result that society has no value for even marriage. And Srila Prabhupada always used to say, mention in his classes, that women are meant to be protected first at home by the father, and then when they get married, they have to be protected by the husband, and thereafter, when they have children, they are meant to be protected by the when they are married, women are supposed to be protected by the husband, and then after they have children, they are supposed to be protected by their sons. So this is how the Vedic culture was very perfectly designed, so that they are protected at all stages. And when they are not protected, then what happens is that the women are exploited for sense enjoyment, and women become degraded, which we see today. And not only that, Krishna has actually created men as well as women in a perfect, I would say, nature. When perfect nature means, it is said that women are more directed towards an emotional nature, whereas men are more directed towards a rational state, nature. It does not mean that women does not have the rational, or do not have emotions, but to a very great extent, men are designed to have that rationality and less of emotions, whereas women are driven to more emotions. The reason is that a woman needs to give a lot of emotional support to children, and that is why women are supposed to have a lot of emotions, whereas men are supposed to be having a lot of rational thinking. So when it is used in the proper way, then what happens is that the relationship is successful. That's why marriage becomes successful. But when it is not used properly, then it ends in a failure. There is an example in 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Narad Muni gives an analogy of what happens when a man joins with a woman. He says, man is like a butter and woman is like a fire. So when the butter is kept near a fire, it melts, which is true, and which is what we see today. So when there is an unrestricted contact between a man and woman, then there is an agitation of mind, or in the mind of both. And also it is mentioned that women generally do not have the discriminatory power like men. That means women can be easily carried away and exploited by men. So one has to be carefully understand the subject matter properly, and then relate with the opposite sex in a, ideally one has to avoid relating with opposite sex other than those with one's wife or husband. This is the best. But I don't know how, because women have already reached a stage that they can think that they cannot live without being working or things like that. The outcome of that is that when women are situated in a place where they are supposed to take decisions, they are not able to take the decisions because their rationality is less, but they take decisions out of their emotions. Similarly, it is said that a man can lose his intelligence in emotional situations. So, uh, Prahlad Maharaj actually gives a quote in 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. That means when we have rub two hands, we feel that we are relieving an itch. But what happens is, grihasthas who have no spiritual knowledge become grihamedis. They think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually it is a source of distress. That means one can think that this activity brings happiness, but unfortunately it doesn't bring happiness, it brings distress. But however, those who are dhira means those who are sober, who are perfect, they can tolerate this itching, and they are not subjected to the sufferings like fools and rascals. That means those who can tolerate this itching can become free from the sufferings which others have. It's a similar quote by Yamunacharya. You all have heard the name of Yamunacharya. He gave a very popular quote, which is Srila Prabhupada used in many of his classes. He said, since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought and my lips curl with distaste. Now, Yamunacharya, it is said, was formerly a very great king who enjoyed a lot of happiness in various ways by uniting with the opposite sex. But what happened was, when he started engaging in service of the Lord, then he started enjoying spiritual bliss. Bliss, not happiness. Bliss is at a higher level than happiness. And he started even developing a hatred when he was thinking of sex. So if such a person like him can have, it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody. So the point is that the only thing is for to take up the devotional, transcendental, loving service rather than Krishna, by which one can develop a distaste for this activity. Before I conclude the class, I will give one more example of how this activity can drive a person to what extent. This is given the 8th or 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Saugari Muni was a great rishi, and he was performing austerities underwater for a very long period of time. And he lived without eating anything for a long period, to the extent that his body was covered with seaweeds and so forth. To that extent, he was so focused. But what happens was, he saw a pair of fish meeting. And from then, he started perceiving the pleasure of this activity. And then what happened is, induced by this desire, he went to King Mandata. Now, since he had performed austerities underneath the water, he was not looking very attractive. So he went to King Mandata at that time, and he said that I want one of your daughters for marriage. King said, okay, you can pick up whomever you want, and if they like, you can get married. But none of his daughters wanted to marry Saubhari Rishi, because he was looking very ugly, not shaven and things like that. Now, this Saubhari Muni was a great rishi, and he was a great yogi. So what he did was, he changed his outlook by shaving, by taking off his hairs, everything. He became very, very beautiful personality. And then he went back again to the king, asking for one of his daughters to get married. Now, when we went back, the king said, you can select. But what happened was, the king had 50 daughters, and all the 50 daughters of the king, they got attracted seeing the beauty of this person, that is Saubhari Muni. And they all wanted to marry him. And Saubhari Muni also did not want to refuse. So he married all the 50. Because those days, men used to have many wives. And with each of them, he had 100 children. And this way, he went on with his life, enjoying with his family, because huge family, and he maintained. And at one point of time, he realized what was the cause of this problem that he had got into. Then he realized that all that he did was sought to fish which was mating, and then that drove him to that desire. And with the result, he married 50 women, and after marrying 50 women, he was still not satisfied. Then he started thinking, why is it that even after having 50 women in my life, I'm not feeling that satisfaction? So that is when he started performing again tapasya. And there is 2 slokas for which I'll just read the translation. This in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, while practicing austerity, even within the depths of the water, and while observing all the regulations and practice by saintly person, I lost the results of my long austerities simply by association with the sexual affairs of fish. So just by seeing two fish mating, he says that I lost the results of all the austerities that I performed throughout my life. So what happens? We all struggle throughout our life. But what happens is that when we start engaging, it takes us down and down. That then he says everyone should observe this fall down and learn from it. The next sloka, it says a person desiring liberation from material bondage must give up the association of persons interested in sex life and should not employ his senses externally. In the brackets, Prabhupada mentions in seeing, in hearing, talking, walking, and so on. That means here he says that one should not even associate with persons who are interested in this activity. What way that person may be, he may be, the other person may be associated by seeing or by hearing or by talking or by walking, whatever it is. One should not associate with a person who is interested in any of these activities. One should always stay in a secluded place, completely fixing his mind at the lotus feet of the unlimited personality of Godhead. And if one wants any association at all, he should associate with persons similarly engaged. That means one should perform devotional service. And if at all one wants to associate, one should associate with those who are performing devotional service. And one more translation, two more slokas I'll take through only the translation. He says, in the beginning I was alone and engaged in performing the austerities of mystic yoga. But later on, because of the association of fish engaged in sex, I desired to marry. So Shaubari Muni wanted to marry only by seeing the fish. Otherwise, he had no desire. Then I became the husband of 50 wives. And in each of them, I begot 100 sons. And thus my family increased to 5,000 members. By the influence of the modes of material nature, I became fallen and thought that I would be happy in material life. So Shaubari Muni also thought that he would be very happy in the material life. Thus, there is no end to my material desire for enjoyment in this life and the next. So Shaubari Muni realized that he cannot enjoy material life, not only in this lifetime, but also in the next lifetime. Then he says, in this way, in the next sloka, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the translation. In this way, he passed his life in household affairs for some time, but then he became detached from material enjoyment. To renounce material association, he accepted the Vanaprastha order and went to the forest. His devoted wives followed him, for they had no shelter other than their husband. So what happened was Shaubari Muni at some point of time realized that there can be no happiness, and he took to the Vanaprastha order of life. And when he took to this Vanaprastha order, his wives also followed suit. And then finally what happens is that he went back to Godhead at the last moment because he started practicing that austerity again. And because he went back to Godhead, his wives also got that shared in marriage. It is said that a woman shares 50% of the pious activities performed by her husband. So Shaubari Muni also, because he went back to Godhead, his wives also got the opportunity to go back to Godhead. That means if a husband practices Krishna consciousness and the wife follows the path as husband, she gets the result of going back to Godhead if the husband goes back to Godhead. So that is how powerful the devotional service is. I'll just read the translation. When Shaubari Muni, who was quite conversant with the self, went to the forest, he performed severe penances. In this way, in the fire at the time of death, he ultimately engaged himself in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the last sloka in the chapter, it is said, where Sukadeva Goswami is telling to Parikshit Maharaj, by observing their husband progressing in spiritual existence, Shaubari Muni's wives were also able to enter the spiritual language. So Shaubari Muni's spiritual potency helped his wife also go back to Godhead by that spiritual power. So this is what they all derive the benefit of Shaubari Muni's spiritual practice. So the lesson that can be learned today is that one should not indulge in this activity as an activity for sense gratification, but rather to be used for bringing up children who can be delivered from the cycle of birth and death. And then, of course, devotional service is something that it can free oneself from all these perverted desires. And of course, the last point was that woman shares the results of the spiritual activities of her husband also, if she sincerely follows her husband. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. Any of you have any questions, any comments? I can take it for the next 5 minutes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandava Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandava Prabhu. Tell me.
Which is like, why is that woman is given the share? Why not the men, Prabhu? Why is it partiality?
It's not a partialist. A man is supposed to be a head of the family. This was the culture during the Esther years. Am I correct?
Yes, Prabhu, yes, yes.
And a woman was always supposed to be at home performing her household duties. So there are reasons why man was positioned at that point, because with this understanding, because man is to be, like I mentioned, man is supposed to be situated intelligently on this platform as a head of the family. Of course, women had their power at home, but men were more rational. So man was supposed had a higher role, and women were relatively at home performing household duties. So men had more activities to perform for the maintenance of the family, without which a family cannot survive. And a woman, a chaste woman, is supposed to keep the man, her husband, in such a way that he does not have a desire to develop attraction for any other one in the opposite sex. And this culture was prevailing until a few years back, where women started thinking themselves to be on the equal footing as man, which is not true. But society became driven by, we also follow the Western civilization, if I'm right. So we are also following that, and we see how the civilization has degraded. So when a man performs activities that are driven to, women generally are not easily falling into spiritual practices. But what happens when a husband takes up the spiritual practice and a woman follows, she gets the benefit out of it. But it does not mean that only it happens only in this way. Even today situation, many women are practicing spiritual life, spiritual activities, but men don't fall in easily. That the civilization has gone upside down. That is why we see a negative result these days. The outcome is negative. But if we follow the Vedic, see the Vedic civilization, it has been designed very well, perfectly by the Lord. But the misuse has brought us to this type of degradation. So when a man performs whatever pious activities, not only his wife, both husband and wife share, and children can also get the benefit of that activity. If husband and wife are spiritual, children will also be spiritual and they will also get the benefit. But in the Shastras, it is given that a woman shares 50% of the pious activities. Now, I'm logical part of it, I can't say why 50%, but this is given in the Shastras. I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question, Babu.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Babuji. It's clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Babu. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandava Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandava Pranam.
Thank you for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. My question is,
yes,
if he has done austerity for 1,000 years or thousands of years, why he fell for those fish?
This pastime is narrated to show that even if we look at something which is enjoying this activity, one can fall down. So I read one sloka in which it is said that one should not even associate, from our point of view, we should not even associate with a person who is interested in this type of an activity. Because if we associate, even a moment's association can bring a big difference. Either ways, if you associate with a devotee, it can bring us to devotional service. But if you associate with a materialistic person who has this inclination, it will take no time for us to get entangled into this activity. Now, why this pastime is given? So that if we see, Saubharmuni saw two fish mating, but he had a desire seeing that, oh, they are enjoying this activity. That thinking can bring us down and drive us down to any extent. That is what is shown by this pastime. So one should not even try to enjoy seeing an activity by any other living entities also. We may see it, it may not be possible to avoid it completely, but we don't dwell into that activity. That is very important.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? If no questions, can I
so does it mean that this can happen to devotees also? Like they are also doing devotional service, and then sometime we go to offices or we go to some other relatives' places?
Yes, it can happen, Prabhu. Even during Srila Prabhupada's time, many disciples fell down. And even in the case of Shaubhari Muni, I didn't complete the pastime because it was not required today. It is said that Shaubhari Muni committed some offense previously, and that is why he had to pay the price for it. We will not dwell into that subject today. I will take it up some other time. But the point is that even during Srila Prabhupada's time, many disciples fell during when he was here. Some of them fell even after he left because they were not firmly fixed in devotional service. So one has to be fixed in devotional service, for which one has to be constantly associating with devotees of the Lord. Even in moments associated with a non-devotee, one can fall down. But today you can't avoid because the society has got more of non-devotees. But one has to be very careful in associating. Just do the work and come back. When I was working also, I have seen so many offices. I was in the marketing side. So many offices where women were playing roles which are not required. But then the thing is, that is how the society is driven. We must just go, try to do our work as far as possible and get out of it without associating with it. And a moment's association with a woman who is what you call one who can tempt others can be very disastrous for a man. That is why one should be very careful in the place we work, in the environment we work. All these factors have to be taken into consideration. I mean, I've retired more than about 12, 15 years before. I don't know how it is today, but I can see the society very, very degraded.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Babu. Anybody else? If nothing, then I'm closing the class. Thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada